Okay, welcome to Chapter 3, Section 2, as well as Section 3 also. This is business growth and expansion. We're looking at are the different ways companies can combine with each other, and when we do have a combination of businesses, separate businesses, we call that a merger. Um, the opposite of that is a spin-off when a company sells off a portion or they create a whole new business. And so we see a lot of companies like that today. But we're just looking at connections. And so we have two basic types of merger. There's a horizontal and a vertical merger. And then, merger where there's no clear connection in what people do, we call a conglomerate. So there's three basic ways or methods or concepts behind mergers. Okay, and so companies might actually use a little bit of both. So, the reason why companies would want to do a merger is, sometimes just getting big enough. When you're big enough, you produce much more quantity, much lower cost per product, and so it's a productivity issue. And so, but there's some issues there when we create two businesses, one business out of two. There are often issues of will those cultures merge really well. The merger of Daimler and Chrysler about 10 years ago didn't really work out, and so they ended up selling that back to Chrysler. Became a separate company. Chrysler went bankrupt. Government bailed it out, and then the government turned around and sold it to Fiat. So right now, as of this moment, Fiat controls and owns Chrysler, so Chrysler is no longer an American-owned business. The one merger that has survived is the CW. A couple of years ago, we had something called the UPN and the WB, and what they decided to do was combine those two networks and choose the best shows from each, and they put it onto one network, and it was a great way. It's been very successful for them. Sears and Kmart, essentially, Sears bought Kmart, and but they choose to utilize the separate names for the different companies. Sears Essentials, right there in Spring Valley, the Sears Essentials store was a Kmart, and now it's going back to Kmart. So that's a horizontal merger when two companies that sell the same kind of thing. We look at Daimler Chrysler; they're both selling cars. UPN and WB; they're both television networks. Sears and Kmart; those are both retail stores. So they're doing the same thing. So that's what we call horizontal. A vertical merger is a little more complex, not too complicated. Think of it this way. Let's say one company makes staples and another company makes staplers. Well, if one company were to buy up both, that would be a vertical merger. They're part of the same process of delivering the total product. And so FedEx bought Kinko's a few years ago, so that's where we see the FedEx store. And then just recently, Disney bought Pixar, and then which is not in this slideshow, but Disney just recently just bought Lucas Holdings, Star Wars properties, and so now Disney controls that. And so Disney is really good at distribution of movies, whereas Pixar or even Lucasfilms was really good at producing the actual film itself. So they were combining different parts of the process of creating the whole thing. Now, if there's no connection between what the company is doing, and somebody's buying them up, and the idea is they're investments. We buy these companies and we hold them and we increase the value and we make money just by making more money, right? Another thing is to increase the value of the business and then later sell it off. So there's different ways of sort of doing this, but we call that a conglomerate when there's no real connection. One of the weirdest examples is what we see here is Altria. They control Philip Morris, Kraft Foods, SAB Miller, and Altria Financial. So Philip Morris, makes cigarettes, and Kraft Foods, Kraft macaroni and cheese, SAB Miller, Miller Beer, okay, and Altria Financial, they do financial services and insurance and banking and things like that. So there's no connection unless you want to go to a bank, eat some macaroni and cheese, smoke a cigarette, and have a beer. There's really no connection between those products all at the same spot. Now, many large corporations now have operations all over the world, and there's a lot of benefits to that. Different countries have different skill sets. Different countries have different rules and regulations with different products. And another thing too is it kind of protects you. You may have the exact same factory in two separate countries, or even two different cities. If something happens in one country, you're not totally offline. One of our local businesses right here, Qualcomm, was having some difficulty getting its chips produced because it was in the region that was affected by the tsunami and the nuclear meltdown in northern Japan. And so that was something they realized is we need to expand into other places so that we're protected. Lots of things can happen. And so one of the things too is, selling products over the world. So McDonald's and Coca-Cola are great examples of multinational corporations that have been doing that for a long time. Now, what these companies do, because they're not dummies, if you sell the exact same product all over the world, it tends to not work. What they do is they take the product and they adjust it slightly to fit the needs and the wants and the tastes of the people where they are. So that's globalization, but they'll localize the product so as to make it something people would want. Chapter 3, Section 3. This talks about different types of organizations. A lot of the things we see, a lot of the products and services that are produced by nonprofit organizations. So the idea is all business have costs, all businesses have revenue. When there's money left over, then that's profit. Well, a nonprofit business must turn around and put that money back into the organization to help more people. So that's the purpose of a nonprofit organization. And obviously, the government, part of their role is to make sure that that's what nonprofits do. So you can see lots of examples here of nonprofit organizations. Just a little side note. These are also wonderful places to work and have a career. So just because they're nonprofits doesn't mean they don't pay. Some of these organizations pay very well and will use you. And again, the nice thing is you feel like you're making a difference when you work for a nonprofit organization. A cooperative is again, it is similar. It's nonprofit. It's member owned. That's a great way to think about it. And so, a lot of the credit unions that you see around here are examples of cooperatives. So whereas Bank of America or Wells Fargo or one of those companies, those are for-profit banks. Typically, they're going to charge higher amounts or rates for when people go to purchase a loan. A labor union is a group of workers who have banded together to collectively or together to negotiate with the owner for higher wages, better benefits, and it can be a very effective way to get what you want. One of the concerns is companies where the union is too powerful and the union demands too much. We're seeing some of those companies go out of business, and so there is a fine line between forcing the company to pay, and actually doing it to the point where the company actually cannot function, cannot make a profit. And that is what labor unions do. Okay, so that is the end of chapter 3. So please study, take notes, get into the book, study and take notes from the book also.